Major Darius Reed eased his sedan down Maple Avenue, the late afternoon sun glinting off his dress uniform's silver braid. At 32, he was no ordinary soldier, a former Navy SEAL turned Army intelligence specialist, celebrated for his cool under fire and the silent protocol he architected. That protocol, a whisper of hope for any service member in peril, instantly links a secure device to a dedicated military response center whenever danger strikes. Tonight, on his last drive home before his Pentagon assignment, Darius carried that lifeline in his breast pocket. Silverbrook felt unchanged from his boyhood memories: white picket fences, magnolia trees in full bloom, and the soft hum of crickets just beginning their evening song. He planned a brief visit with his mother, her chicken pot pie waiting on the stove before reporting for duty at the Pentagon. Routine, he told himself. Familiar, safe. The sudden flash of red and blue in his rearview mirror shattered that illusion. He glanced down 40 in a 40 zone. His signal had clicked on long before the turn. No reason for panic. He had trained for far worse than this. He tapped his brakes and pulled over hands at 10 and 2 as he drilled 1,000 times. From the shadows, Officer Henry Marks appeared, flashlight beam cutting through the dusk. Darius lowered his window with the precision of a marksman lining up a shot. "Major Reed, United States Army," he announced, sliding his ID into view. "Am I under arrest?" Marks's response was a sneer. "License and registration," he barked, eyes hard beneath his cap. As Darius reached for his documents, 2 more patrol cars roared in an ominous echo that something far darker than a traffic stop had begun. In that heartbeat, the silent protocol pulsed alive in Darius's pocket, and a distant command center stirred, sensing the first tremors of injustice. The real battle was only just beginning. Major Reed's calm veneer cracked as 4 patrol cars roared to a halt around him. Officer Marks stalked to the driver's side, flashlight slicing the twilight. Behind him, Ross Pearson Vaughn fanned out, hands hovering like they expected a firefight. "License and registration," Mark's snarled chest pressed against the truck's grill beam, pinned on Darius's face. He didn't ask why he'd been pulled over, only barked orders. Darius unbuckled with deliberate slowness, heart thudding like a war drum. He retrieved his document, his driver's license, military ID stamped U.S. Army Silent Protocol badge, neatly tucked in his wallet. Ross leaned in, eyes flicking to the encrypted phone on the passenger seat. Pierce stood behind him, sturdy and silent, pistols outlined faint beneath her coat. Vaughn scanned the neighborhood, doubt creasing his brow as he considered his next move. None of them had bothered to switch on body cameras. None had given a single explanation beyond suspicious. Darius slid forward, his registration voice steady. "Everything is in order, officers. I'm on leave before my Pentagon assignment." He kept his palms open on the wheel for all to see. But Marks glanced at Vaughn, then back at Darius, and sneered. "Step out of the vehicle." Each officer drew closer as if expecting resistance. Darius rose effortlessly, 6 feet 2 inches of disciplined muscle, yet he didn't bristle. He met their stares with the same controlled calm that had kept him alive on battlefields. He posed no threat, only flexed his right hand reflexively near his wallet. Marks ignored the ID. He barked into his radio. "All units suspect, military impersonator, armed and dangerous until proven otherwise." The words splintered the night air. Darius's silent protocol device pulsed warm against his chest pocket. Across hundreds of miles, a console in Virginia flickered to life, ready to intervene. The officers moved in prep to treat a decorated Army major as a career criminal. And in that tense moment, justice hung by the thinnest of threads. Tension snapped like a live wire the moment Darius straightened his posture and asked again, "Why am I being stopped?" The 4 officers exchanged a silent nod before Marks grunted. "Suspicious vehicle." No further explanation, just the crackle of police radios summoning 2 more cruisers, their red and blue beacons painting the suburban street like a war zone. Darius lifted his hands, military precision, guiding each movement, and presented his identification, driver's license, military ID, silent protocol emblem. "I'm on leave. Visiting my mother before reporting to the Pentagon," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. Instead of deference, he received sneers. Ross chuckled as Pierce leaned in, pistol hand trembling. Vaughn hovered behind them, uneasy but complicit. None activated their body cameras. Without warning, Marks yanked Darius from the car, slamming his chest against the hood. The world tilted as Darius's uniform blade stripe tore under the weight of rough hands. He barely registered the rip of fabric before a harsh metallic click bit into his wrists. The crisp snap of the handcuffs echoed louder than the squeal of tires or the whirl of lights. In that violent tangle, metals clattered to the pavement, Bronze Star Purple Heart symbols of valor trampled by prejudice. Darius's breath hitched, but he refused to struggle. Every instinct screamed resistance, yet he kept his tone measured. "You're making a grave mistake," he managed, jaw clenched against the pain. Marx's only reply was laughter, a cold, contemptuous sound that bounced off the houses like mockery. As the officers hauled him toward the patrol car, tearing at the remains of his uniform and leaving him exposed in civilian jeans, Darius's silent protocol pulse sent its urgent signal back to Washington. Somewhere a console lit up. Somewhere someone pressed into action. But here on this quiet street, 4 officers treated a decorated Army major as a dangerous criminal. And in that outrage, the true battle lines were drawn not on foreign soil, but in America's own backyard. Inside the precinct's frigid holding cell, he sat shackled to the bench uniform, torn metals strewn on the concrete floor like discarded trophies. Through the iron bars, the 4 officers leaned in, voices dripping with derision, as they sketched out charges impersonating an officer resisting arrest, unlawful possession of encrypted devices. Each accusation landed like a hammer blow, but Darius refused to rise to their bait. He remained silent, breathing steadily, resolve hardening behind his calm gaze. When they finally turned away, certain they'd broken him, Darius reached into his jacket, fingering the device he carried for moments like this. "Mom," he whispered into the phone, that single word masking the silent protocol code. On the other end, Pentagon consoles flickered to life, security officers noting his distress, analysts pinpointing his precise location, linguists parsing every syllable of the officer's taunts. Unseen, the military's most advanced intelligence network began to hum GPS pings, tracing the police station's coordinates, audio feeds, capturing whispered slurs and boastful boasts, real-time data streams archiving each procedural violation. While the officers strutted outside convinced of their power, a different kind of force was mobilizing, one built on truth, oversight, and the promise of justice. And as the silent protocol pulsed through encrypted circuits toward Washington, Darius sat motionless but unbroken, knowing that in every rigged cell and every corrupt charge, the full weight of the nation's honor was coming to bear. At the Pentagon Secure Operations Center, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Jenkins stood over a bank of monitors, crisp uniform impeccable, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. On one screen, real-time audio feed crackled voices of the local officers mocking and misstating procedure. On another, GPS coordinates traced straight to the Silverborough precinct. Jenkins's team sprang into action. Within minutes, analysts had pulled dash-cam clips and cross-referenced departmental complaint logs, uncovering a troubling pattern. Each of the 4 officers held multiple allegations of excessive force and racial profiling complaints that had been quietly dismissed over the years. "We've got him," Jenkins announced, voice calm but electric with purpose. Her intel officers tapped keystrokes, locking down the audio files and mapping the station's internal camera angles. Through encrypted channels, they alerted the FBI's Civil Rights Division, Operation Silent Shield, in play, immediate intervention required. Briefing slides popped up showing officer histories from disciplinary notes to dismissed lawsuits, painting a damning portrait of systemic bias. Meanwhile, back in the frosty cell, Major Darius Reed exhaled slowly, every nerve taut yet steady. He knew down to his fingertips how the silent protocol he'd helped architect would unfold, and he trusted the process implicitly. The same principles he'd coded into its lines of code were now protecting him: rapid data relay, multi-agency coordination, unassailable chain of custody. He sat silent witness to his own rescue. As Jenkins authorized the next steps, FBI legal teams mobilizing local command notifications, dispatching Darius felt a quiet surge of affirmation. The shield he'd built for vulnerable service members had swung into motion exactly when he needed it most. Beyond the steel bars and jeering laughter, a coalition of professionals thousands of miles away was gathering the facts, preparing to dismantle the injustice he faced. And in that charged stillness, he understood that when courage met technology, even the smallest silent call could set a great wrong back on the path to right. In the days that followed, FBI agents and military intelligence operatives converged on Silverbrook under the direction of Police Chief Robert Lawrence. In the precinct's dimly lit records room, Lawrence combed through the initial incident report: taillight violation, No GPS anomaly, no erratic driving. Frustration crackled in the air as he matched the dashcam footage to on-site security cameras, confirming that Darius had adhered to every traffic law. Lawrence summoned officers Marks, Ross, Pierce, and Vaughn to his office, the tension hanging as heavy as the midday sun outside. One by one, he laid out the discrepancies, simultaneous camera malfunctions, missing body cam footage, and contradictory accounts of the stop. "We're not here to play games," he said, voice low but steely. "I expect full cooperation with the FBI." At first, Marks bristled, denying any wrongdoing, while Ross shifted uncomfortably, avoiding direct eye contact. Pierce's jaw clenched. Vaughn attempted a weak smile, as if sheer entitlement could diffuse the gravity of the moment. But as Lawrence pressed for sworn statements, the facade began to crumble. Ross admitted he'd flipped off his camera. Pierce confessed she'd toggled hers off, fearing technical glitches, and Marks and Vaughn each quietly acknowledged adjusting evidence before submitting their reports. With every stunned admission, FBI agents recorded the testimony, their microphones unblinking. Legal advisors in crisp suits took notes, preparing charges of evidence, tampering, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. Chief Lawrence watched, a knot of relief loosening in his gut. He had known these officers too long to believe the initial story. Outside his office door, the silent protocol data continued streaming to Pentagon servers, audio clips of the officers' own slurs, geolocation logs, verifying Darius's exact position, and encrypted records of every ill-judged comment made within range of his device. The weight of that irrefutable evidence bore down on the precinct, forcing even the most obstinate to face the truth. By dusk, the once untouchable quartet of officers sat subdued, their bravado dissolved in the glare of cross-agency oversight. The first crucial hurdle had been cleared, internal review was underway, and soon the FBI would file federal charges. In Silverbrook, a rotting underbelly had been exposed, and the wheels of true accountability began to turn. As the FBI's interviews wrapped up back in Silverbrook, the full force of the silent protocol data landed like a thunderbolt. Every officer's own words, casual slurs, mocking tones, and cold suggestions of how to teach him a lesson had been captured in crystal-clear audio. Even the faintest background noise of cuffs clicking and boots on pavement became incriminating evidence. In Pentagon conference rooms, Major General Harold Mitchell presided over briefings that crackled with urgency. Sharp-suited aides unrolled transcripts on sleek tables. Digital maps plotted the exact moments when each officer violated protocol and basic human decency. Mitchell's steely gaze swept the screen, showing 4 badges: Marks, Ross, Pierce, and Vaughn. He tapped a finger against his notes. "This can't stand," he said, voice low but resonant. "We will make this a textbook case, an unmistakable signal that our people are protected and abuse of power carries consequences at every level." In the same secure meeting, intelligence analysts outlined the web of evidence, timestamps linking derogatory remarks to each officer. The encrypted phones, geolocation verifying Darius's compliance with all traffic laws, and the chain of custody logs proving that any camera malfunctions were deliberate acts of tampering. Each revelation chipped away at any pretense of plausible deniability. Meanwhile, orders buzzed down to Silverbrook PD's highest levels: cooperate, fully preserve all records, and expect subpoenas. The 4 officers, once unassailable in their hometown, had now faced federal civil rights charges. Their futures hung in the balance as legal teams prepared for courtroom showdowns. And Darius, his promotion paperwork already signed by senior Pentagon leadership, now moved forward without delay. The lieutenant colonel's insignia he'd earned in combat would be pinned on with full honors, underscoring the message: those who serve under our flag deserve unwavering respect. In the corridors of power, the Silverbrook incident was no longer just a local scandal. It had become a defining moment in the ongoing fight against discrimination within the ranks, proving that silence, when backed by truth, can topple injustice at its core. In the hushed federal courtroom, the weight of the evidence was impossible to ignore. The prosecutor laid out the pristine silent protocol recordings, dashcam footage, and pattern analysis reports showing a systemic bias in every stop. When called to testify, Darius spoke with the calm authority of a soldier who followed orders to the letter, hands at his sides, voice steady, eyes meeting the jury. He detailed how he identified himself, how he complied, and how each officer's own words betrayed their unchecked prejudice. Outside defense attorneys scrambled to find mitigating circumstances, pointing to their clients' service records, and suggesting stressful night shift conditions. But when the judge learned that body cameras had been deliberately disabled and that two officers had prior complaints for excessive force, all pretense of innocence crumbled. In a decisive moment, bail was denied for Officer Marks and Officer Pierce, who now faced remand. Officers Ross and Vaughn were allowed supervised release, their electronic monitors clicking loudly like mortal consequences. That ruling sent a clear message: authority carries accountability. When people sworn to protect abandon their oath, the full force of justice must hold them to it. And in that courtroom, under the watchful eyes of the judge and nation, discrimination met its reckoning. When the final verdict echoed through the packed federal courtroom, the magnitude of justice finally settled in. Officer Henry Marks received a 15-year sentence for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and perjury, his defiance crumbling under the weight of indisputable proof. Officer Lauren Pierce was handed 8 years after her dishonorable discharge from the Army surfaced alongside her mocking commentary. Officer Derek Vaughn, once shielded by family influence, faced 10 years behind bars as his privileged pardon evaporated in light of his role in targeting a uniformed soldier. Officer Julian Ross, whose cooperation had helped expose a broader culture of bias, was sentenced to 5 years, with part of his term suspended in strict electronic monitoring, acknowledging both his misconduct and his willingness to testify. Back in Silverbrook, the ripple effects were immediate. The police department, under Chief Robert Lawrence's firm guidance, enacted sweeping reforms. Body cameras now operate without pause. Anti-bias training became mandatory for every recruit, and a civilian oversight commission was empowered to review complaints and discipline officers who stray from their oath. Accountability, once a distant ideal, became institutional policy. At the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense, Harold Mitchell, signed an order extending the silent protocol emergency line to all senior service members, ensuring that no soldier, regardless of rank, will ever again be left vulnerable to unchecked prejudice. Meanwhile, back in his hometown, Darius Reed channeled his experience into action. He announced the creation of the Reed Foundation for Justice Reform, a public-private partnership dedicated to funding police training programs in de-escalation and civil rights law, supporting community oversight boards, and providing legal aid to those wronged by profiling. In the end, 4 careers lay in ruins, but a system once blind to its own failures woke with new clarity. The very protocols Darius helped design to protect a single man became the blueprint for a more just future, proof that resilience, integrity, and the quiet power of one soldier's voice can transform entire institutions. Now celebrated as Lieutenant Colonel and hailed nationwide, he stood beneath the oak-lined steps of Silverbrook Courthouse to witness the signing of the landmark reform agreement. In a firm, resonant voice honoring every citizen's dignity, he spoke of equality before the law and the unbreakable worth of human life. The very officers once divided by their biases, now convicted and removed, had become symbols of a broken system reborn. Local deputies, long split by mistrust, now trained side by side under new protocols, unified in purpose rather than prejudice. This wasn't merely the end of one man's suffering, but the dawn of a systemic turning point, proof that unwavering patience, disciplined action, and cutting-edge technology can dismantle injustice from within. As cameras clicked and community leaders applauded, his steady gaze swept the crowd, because sometimes the greatest victories arrive not with thunderous protests, but with the silent resolve of one committed heart reshaping an entire justice system. Through the tense journey and relentless fight for justice of our protagonist, we learn that silence can be the most powerful weapon when paired with discipline and technology. Patience, composure under pressure, and faith in a system, even when that very system works against you, can generate the force needed to turn suffering into the catalyst for reform. The clear message is in the harshest of circumstances. Strategic action and steadfast dignity make justice undeniable. Were you in the protagonist's shoes, your next step might be to leverage that reputation and experience to broaden your impact, founding or joining nonprofits, raising public awareness, and advising law enforcement on preventing racial bias and monitoring the implementation of new reforms. As for whether racism will fully end by 2050, blind optimism would be unrealistic. History teaches us that deeply rooted prejudices are not eradicated with a few decades of reform. Yet if today's generation continues to fight, champion transparency and accountability, we can hope that by mid-century society will have significantly narrowed the gap of bias, reduced acts of discrimination, an inch closer to genuine equality. It is a long road that demands each individual dare to speak up, every community persist in learning, and institutions commit to internal transformation.